Entire online communities are devoted to faking autism for clout. Charlatans are acting like fictional characters who glorify autism to advertise themselves. In fact, most autism is much worse than my case. I'm miraculously able to talk despite autism. Uh, in elementary school, the point of the gifted and talented groups was to identify who to experiment on. I what was sent to special education where drugs were tested upon me. I nearly died from forced drugging. The forced drugging caused drowsiness, and I was thrown in detention for sleeping in class because I wasn't allowed to stay awake. I miraculously graduated despite being forced to sleep in school, and I had no prescriber when I graduated, so I suffered withdrawal symptoms, got locked up over withdrawal symptoms, and uh, from then, psychiatrists repeatedly sent me through the revolving door. They kept re-traumatizing me by sending me back to hospitals to forcibly drug me again. Uh, I I was brutalized. Uh, the torture I won't describe. Um, and that's because I have the kind of autism that's glorified, the rare kind, the kind that's incorrectly portrayed as a good thing. The the positive aspects of autism are few and far between. I mean, the positive aspects of the better kind of autism are few and far between. It's a miracle I didn't get epilepsy. There are much more severe cases of autism than mine. There are the nonverbal, the epileptic. There are people who have to wear helmets and diapers for their entire lives. The media rarely mentions that. While fictional portrayals of autism glamorize it like it's somehow a good thing, the news media does the opposite. Autism doesn't cause rampages. The media is lying. And it's the same media that indoctrinates the populace to downplay autism and to accuse autists of self-hatred for simply saying that autism is devastating. I got tortured in school, hospitals, and group homes. I was nearly blinded. That was a waste of electricity and taxpayers' money. I had written critical reviews, so every light was kept on full blast and the blinds were left open. A doctor wrote a note imploring the crooks to accommodate. Instead, they did the opposite. They continued wasting electricity and taxpayers' money. They even installed an extra light, a motion-activated light, at my door to fry my eyes every time I went to the door to my own room. I had to hang a blanket over the window to block the sunlight. They kept pretending that they had never heard of photophobia, in other words, light sensitivity. They kept pretending they didn't know what they were doing to my eyes. They said, that light's been here the whole time. You never complained before. They didn't really have to keep the blinds open. They didn't really have to waste electricity and taxpayers' money by keeping all of the lights on. The Continuum of Care scam by the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services housed me with known sexual predators, including Mike Inigo. They had him on their Hall of Fame on their official website, mentioning his history of stalking and sexual harassment. So much for privacy laws. Mike Inigo Jr. waited for me at a public park so I couldn't escape him. He threw out my belongings, including my food. The abusive staff members were hiding in the office, getting easy paychecks, knowing he was throwing out my belongings. They wouldn't let him reimburse me because they said there was no evidence, because they were hiding in the office. I get cyber harassed. I'm told, learn to be independent. I wasn't allowed to be independent. If I had been allowed to choose where to reside, I wouldn't have been rotting at a group home. It's like a concentration camp. A lawyer got a cut of my supplemental security income each month, and it adds up to a lot. And she paid the crooks rent while they tortured me. If I had been allowed to choose where to reside, I would have been elsewhere. I would have willingly paid rent for a better setting. Some liar who pretended to be my friend for years suddenly stopped pretending to be my friend and told me rent is standard. Like he didn't know that I wasn't allowed to choose where or how to live. It's called conservatorship. A lawyer was appointed as a conservator of person. Some liar kept pretending that he didn't understand my situation. A liar who had a car and a license to drive could have easily driven to the group home to transport me to a better setting to get a break from torture, but instead he blamed me. He blamed the victim. He said it was because of my perspective. He said, "You're preventing your own happiness." When he got called out for driving to events I would have attended, and he had room in his car, I told him I would have bought a ticket if I had a ride, and he continued the victim blaming, like I hadn't explained to him that there was a conservator of person and that I wasn't allowed to choose where or how to live. A liar who faked a friendship since middle school told me I can't remember the last time someone reached out to me without needing something. All of those people could have easily provided a break from torture. They drive, I don't. There's no way I'm going to drive now. My eyes got fried at a group home. Hence the prescription glasses with the slight red tint. They're not sunglasses. They would be much darker if they were sunglasses. They're tinted to treat photophobia, and I also have a high astigmatism. My vision was already impaired before. It's impaired much worse now. My eyes will hopefully eventually heal. I have better doctors now. For years, I was ignored. Potentially fatal diseases were unaddressed. At a group home in Wethersfield, Connecticut, the one where I was housed with Mike Inigo Jr., the known sexual predator I mentioned, the crooks didn't remind me that insurance covers transportation to doctor's appointments. They let me think I had to rely on them, and they wouldn't let me go to doctors about potentially fatal diseases. If I hadn't gotten out of the group home racket, I would have died. They housed me with bullies, encouraged them to bully me, falsely accused me of bullying the bullies, and falsely accused me of bullying them so they could have an excuse to not bring me to doctors. They were just going to let me die. And they suddenly changed their minds when Mike Inigo Jr. targeted one of them, Sophie Dixon. They finally admitted that he's a creep, and they knew that the whole time. They couldn't have been unaware of his history when they housed me with him. And privacy laws don't justify any of this because they bragged that he's a so-called client. They had him on the Hall of Fame on their official website as if he was a success story. They didn't help him stop being a creep. He's still a creep. He was eventually removed from that house to become someone else's problem. Finally, they accelerated the process of removing him because one of them got targeted by him. That's after they sided with him. Until then, that's a double standard. I wrote critical reviews, so they tortured me, and they let him throw out my belongings. They let him stalk me by waiting for me at a park I was known to frequent. He knew I was trying to escape him, so he went and sat at the gazebo at the park that he knew damn well I walked to nearly daily. And he's still doing what he does, and it's still the same thing. The crooks get easy paychecks, and they do nothing for the so-called clients, and I get cyber harassed and told, learn to be independent. I was a political prisoner. And I'm told, get a job. I'm not allowed to get a job. Nobody gives leeway to the disabled who don't look disabled. I'm not even allowed to apply for jobs. Because nobody sees my disability, there's no way anybody's going to hire me. Employers don't care that discrimination is against the law. That's unenforced. They get away with ableism. Of course I'm not allowed to get a job. Case managers never did their so-called job. They don't have to do their so-called jobs to get paid. They never assisted me with getting enrolled in college. They never assisted me with getting jobs. They abused me. And I get cyber harassed for taking a stand against ableism. It's not self-hatred to say that most autism is much worse than my case, and that it's a miracle that I could even talk. What does that have to do with self-hatred? For lack of a better term, I'm what's considered high functioning, and it's still whack. I don't literally have superpowers. That is nonsense. All degrees of autism are devastating. There's a trend of self-diagnosis, watching sitcoms like The Big Bang Theory and Young Sheldon, and pretending to be on the autism spectrum while on the couch. There's a trend of these couch potatoes claiming to be actually autistic, like, how dare they diagnose themselves with autism? Are they trying to get experimented on? Forced drugging is inhumane. I opposed forced drugging on humanitarian grounds, and that provoked retaliation. What else was I supposed to do? Not say anything about it? I wrote critical reviews. That's literally the point of Google reviews. There's a reason there's such a thing as Google reviews. And I was subjected to repeated retaliation. The whole time I got tortured in hospitals and group homes, I knew the situation's much worse for women. Knowing that there are group homes specifically for women alarms me, because there's no way any good dudes would work there. Only a predator would want that job. Where there's a group home specifically for women, there's creeps getting paid to violate them. That I know. I guarantee that a group home for women can't be devoid of predators amongst the staff members. Somebody working there is definitely a predator, 100%. Group homes should be shut down. Psychiatric facilities should be shut down. There's no point reporting them to themselves. They dismiss grievances and retaliate. The only reason to report is to not get bombarded with questions about why not report. Okay? I reported them to themselves and they retaliated, because if not, I'd get asked why I didn't report. The conservator of person, attorney Katrina Camera, wouldn't return my calls when my life was in her hands. I was terrified of the known sexual predators I was housed with. They could have easily broken into my room and violated me. All they'd have to do is slide a card through the door. And while the abusive staff members were encouraging those creeps and torturing me, trying to blind me, worsening my migraines by shoving bright lights in my face, the conservator of person said I'm not allowed to call her office. She said, tell your case manager to call my office on your behalf. My case manager abused me 24/7. And if the conservator had returned my call the first time, I wouldn't have to call a second time. I was terrified I was about to get violated again. I broke down and kept calling her office because she kept ignoring me, and she used that as an excuse to threaten to call the cops on me instead of the creeps who harassed and stalked me. And because I wasn't allowed to choose where to reside, the only way out of that house in Wethersfield was to risk my life in New Haven. Anybody who's watched the news in Connecticut knows that shootings happen in New Haven all the time. People from elsewhere might be unaware. They might only hear about Yale and pizza. I'm like, are you kidding? Most Ivy League schools are in slums. I was terrified walking the streets in New Haven. I could have been murdered for literally no reason. Just because I wasn't harming anybody doesn't mean I wouldn't have gotten murdered. Nobody really has to do anything to get targeted. People get murdered for no reason. It happens. And for frig's sake, it's New Haven. Okay? It's not like Plantsville. Like, I was terrified every time I had to take a walk to buy groceries. And as for why I was there, it's because I didn't choose where to reside. The manager of that place in New Haven, Jess, had the nerve to ask me why I was there, like she didn't know about the conservatorship. Of course she knew there was a conservator person. Of course she knew the housing had to be approved by a conservator. The conservator said there had to be a case manager. So I was stuck in the continuum of care scam. They wouldn't give me a case manager. They denied me a case manager and lied about it. They said that I said not to give me a case manager. I said it's worth having a case manager just in case, because maybe this one will be a good one. It's worth a try. And then they just straight up lied. But not directly to me. No, they lied to my mother instead of me. And then she called me, reiterated what they told them. I never told them not to give me a case manager. They didn't feel like giving me a case manager. I tried doing the intake, didn't get to finish the intake. Wasted time and effort because they just deleted the whole thing and lied. They were short-staffed and they couldn't give everybody a case manager, and they wouldn't admit that they didn't feel like giving me a case manager because they can't stand me. So they just lied to my mother, trying to blame it on me like I said not to give me a case manager. It's all ridiculous. The only way out of conservatorship was to replace that crooked lawyer. There's still a conservatorship. It's still an inconvenience because I can't file lawsuits myself. The conservator has to do so on my behalf. My signature isn't usually enough. The conservator's signature is needed in most cases. Sometimes along with mine, the signature of the client. What happened was my mother is the conservator instead of that crooked lawyer who paid a bunch of crooks to torture me. The way out of conservatorship would be to convince a psychiatrist to convince a judge to end the conservatorship. It's not like I could prepare that kind of case on such short notice. I had to get out of New Haven because I was scared I was about to get murdered. And that apartment had no fire escape. It was a death trap. I definitely could have died there. If I had remained there much longer, I would have inevitably died. It's a matter of when, not if, I would have died. And now, with my mother as the conservator, instead of a crooked lawyer getting a cut of my supplemental security income, it could go to my mother because I already owed her money. And this is still kind of whack. It's still inconvenient at the very least because it's still a conservatorship. I'm still unfree. And some liar told me to get a lawyer. Like he didn't know that a conservative person can't get a lawyer. There's no way that lawyer would have let me file a lawsuit. She was paying the crooks to torture me. She wouldn't let me sue them. As of now, because my mother's the conservator and she would have to file the lawsuit on my behalf, she has called law firms, and instead of saying that there's no case or that the case has no merit, they're saying they don't think they could win the case. They're afraid to sue the state. Therein lies the problem. If such a lawsuit were filed, the problem would be with who it's filed against. The Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. They have so much pull and so much money, they could easily convince a judge to give the wrong ruling. Lawyers wouldn't get a cut of the settlement if there's no settlement, and that'd be exactly what would happen if the judge cares more about who has money and who has pull than who has a case. Of course there's a case, and of course it has merit. There's a personal injury case because I got tortured. The case just doesn't get filed because so far nobody's willing to take the case. More than a few lawyers have said they don't think they could win the case. It's freaking ridiculous. It's all politics. It's the freaking state of Connecticut. I got tortured by state employees. They got to eat for free during the lockdown by pretending to be essential workers. Their job includes torturing people who write critical reviews. They kept giving me reasons to criticize them, and the criticism kept getting harsher, so they kept inflicting more revenge upon me. They kept torturing me over and over and over. I did what had to be done. I had no choice. It's not masochism. I didn't enjoy it. What they did was actual torture. I mean, freaking literally. They had me suffering 24/7, and that's what I was charged rent for. And some snob tells me rent is standard. Like he forgot that if I were allowed to choose where to reside, I would have moved out after the first incident. Hell, I wouldn't have moved in. I wasn't told the truth when I moved in. Whew. And due to the guilt by association, I've lost people. Like a lot of people question why I'm saying these things online. Like, why would I even admit to any of this? Like, it's embarrassing. Most people living in group homes wouldn't want anyone knowing they're living in group homes. It's like, I get it. Okay? But guilt by association is a logical fallacy anyway. It really amounts to nothing. It's really shitty that I've lost people because I go online and take a stand against ableism. I wouldn't have lost anybody in most cases. I mean, I've also posted to take a stand against different forms of discrimination. Haven't lost any friends for opposing racism, classism, patriarchy, but I'm losing friends and potentially even relatives because I'm opposed to ableism. I get accused of embarrassing my family because I go online and say I'm against ableism. It's like, wow, it's getting to the point where we're like, I'm like, does that have anything to do with why people are letting me rot in isolation? Knowing that isolation reminds me of the trauma, knowing I got tortured, is that why people don't invite me anywhere? They don't come visit me? Is it because of guilt by association? Because I post that I'm an activist against ableism? Is that what's scaring away all the chicks? Is that what's scaring away literally everybody? Is that why nobody chills with me at all? Not friends, not even acquaintances. Nobody. Is it because I take a stand against ableism? Are you kidding me? Drug pushers tried shifting the blame to me because I'm addicted to tobacco, but they are unwilling to treat tobacco addiction. They think it's as simple as just quit. They think there's an old-fashioned way to quit. Are you kidding? The withdrawal symptoms are unbearable. Withdrawing from tobacco is excruciatingly painful. The withdrawal keeps getting worse until use is resumed. Withdrawal symptoms escalate until I light up again. That's how it is. And prescribers said they don't care. They're not even going to try to treat the addiction. They said to quit the old-fashioned way, to just quit, like that's ever happened. Like it's really mind over matter. It's not like they've never heard of addiction. They won't admit that I don't choose to suffer from the disgusting taste of tobacco. They pretend that they think I have a choice. They pretend that they don't comprehend that tobacco addiction isn't easily defeated. So they can shift the blame to me. When I condemn them for the harm caused by forcibly drugging me, they're like, but you smoke cigarettes. Not the same thing. I try to quit. I try to quit. It's not easily done. They don't help me try to quit. And then they just shift the blame to me when they forcibly drug me. And, they gave me a really hard time because I'd rather smoke weed than take what they prescribed. They kept worsening post-traumatic stress disorder because they kept re-traumatizing me. I finally got a doctor to admit that the trauma really happened, got diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. A while after I got the qualifying diagnosis, I got prescribed weed. And weed's legal now. I got tortured for many years over medical necessity that is legal now. I should have already had that certificate long before I did. I've had that license since 2017. It's just like, medical necessity used to do more than save my life. I used to also get high. And, like, if anyone asked me, do you even get high anymore? I'd be like, barely and rarely. Like, there's nothing to enjoy except music. Like, there's nobody to pass to, and nobody's here. Like, a lot of the high has to do with socializing. There's nobody to share with. If I had a choice, I would rarely smoke weed by myself. I would sacrifice. So I'd take a loss and freaking share because that'd mean not having to rot in isolation. I would rarely smoke by myself if I had an option. I have to smoke by myself all the time because a bunch of people just suddenly stop faking a friendship. And just because we're all adults now doesn't mean that they're all always at work. A lot of them don't have kids, don't have more than one job. Nobody is literally always at work. It's bullshit. A bunch of people I know for a fact are still partying just stopped inviting me. They know damn well that it's not like I'd invite them since I can't provide transportation. All these people know why I'm not reaching out to invite them anywhere. I'm poor because I'm not allowed to get a job, and I can't bring them anywhere because I don't drive. They stopped reaching out to me. They stopped inviting me, but over nothing. I didn't harm them, And now I'm trapped here by myself. Waiting to get a better apartment. I'm on waiting lists. There's not a lot of places I could live at. Since since supplemental security income is my only money, the only way to get a good apartment would be via the Department of Housing and Urban Development. It's either that or a very low quality apartment, like an infested one, like a tiny room that's infested. I'm not having that. I've lived in places that were so infested, I shouldn't have been paying rent. And a more courageous person might have called the health department instead of paying rent, but I had nowhere to go. And, yeah, like, I wasn't about to be on the street. Like, I've been in places that bad where the infestation was terrible enough that I definitely shouldn't have been paying rent. And the whole time I was asking for a break from the group homes I got abused in, I wasn't asking anybody to let me live with them, either for free or at all. I didn't even ask, hey, how about I pay you rent instead? No, there's no way that happened because the conservator had to approve housing. I was asking them to help me get a break from getting tortured at a group home 24/7. And instead of driving out there to bring me to chill with me, they're giving me a snotty attitude. I shouldn't have to ask them to do what friends are for. They were letting me think they were my friends. They were acting like I was asking for their canteens in the desert. I lack the resources that most people take for granted. It doesn't make any sense to tell me nobody reaches out to me and if they don't need anything. It's like, hey, it's like anybody who tells me that obviously has things I don't have. These are people who have jobs and cars and all those things. It's just such nonsense. I couldn't like I couldn't have been more clear about how terribly I'm suffering because literally nobody positively interacts with me, and all these people seeing what I post online don't respond, and they don't unfriend me. They just keep seeing these posts about if they were my friends, they would do what friends are for, and they don't do what friends are for. The only way to exonerate anyone is in the cases when they really are prevented from doing what friends are for, okay? Some of these people really have kids or whatever, or maybe working full-time or something like that. In too many cases, a bunch of these people could have easily continued inviting me to chill, and they just stopped. And then I reached out to them saying, hey, I'm getting tortured at a group home. You need to get me out of here. And they gave me a snotty attitude. Too many of them could have helped and chose not to. And there's no reason for them to stop inviting me to chill anyway. It's like I kept getting less and less specific. I was like, could somebody chill with me? They don't have to be that great. Just please, somebody who's not an asshole. Could be anybody. And freaking nobody helped. The only break I got from getting tortured at a group home was to visit some relatives and rot on their couch trying to get a hold of people. It's like, hey, I'm in the area. You don't gotta. I'm not even asking you to drive to the group home to help me get out of there to get a break. I'm like, I'm in the area, and still nobody had the decency to chill with me. It's because they're bad people. They faked a friendship. They couldn't have been honest when they let me think they were my friends. These are bad people. There's no excuse for what they did. And I finally got out of the group home racket. I've been here at the place I'm at now. I've been here for over a year on waiting lists for apartments. I've had company twice. There's one exception to nobody having the decency to visit me. This is ridiculous. I had one visitor. I thought I had a lot more friends than I did. It's because a lot of people are so skilled at faking a friendship, I didn't even notice they were exploiting me. I'm not proud of myself. Like a whole crowd of people faked a friendship so well, I didn't notice that when I get tortured again and they're able to help, they're just going to give me an attitude. It's like my memory was so blurred it barely even occurred to me that, like, hey, wait a minute. They stopped inviting me to chill a long time ago anyway. And, they kept asking me questions like, why don't you choose to where to reside? What's a conservatorship? I've never heard of that. What's with the interrogation? I shouldn't have to ask them to bring me to a better setting to get a break from torture. They should have been inviting me to chill. They should have been doing what friends are for. They abandoned the poor dude who's not allowed to get a job and can't drive. They abandoned the poor dude who's so generous that he'll loan money. I'm poor, unemployed, I'm too sick to work, I'm in excruciating pain. Even if anyone would hire me, there's no way I'd be able to keep a job. And I have loaned money. It's called not being an asshole.